Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. As you can see from the background, Amonkhet has been released in Magic Duels, and we're gonna start out with a very exciting deck here, Black-White Zombies, which features a lot of the new zombies from Amonkhet. And Amonkhet brought a lot of interesting new zombies, especially a lot of new anthem effects. We've got a Lord of the Accursed giving zombies +1/+1. We also have Liliana's Mastery giving zombies +1/+1. So a lot of payoff cards for being in a zombie deck, and of course we can't forget Liliana herself. So a lot of interesting cards, but let's start out with the 1-drops, where we have from Eldritch Moon, Cryptbreaker, single black for a 1/1, and the interesting ability here is the second one, letting us tap 3 untapped zombies we control to draw a card at the cost of 1 life. Very powerful ability, and then we can also pay 2, tap the Cryptbreaker, discard a card to make a 2/2 zombie token that enters a battlefield untapped, so you can even use that zombie right away to tap 3 zombies to draw a card. Since this doesn't care about summoning sickness, you can do this at instant speed. So very nice card advantage engine in a zombie deck, and later in the game you can discard your lands when you don't need them to make some more zombies. So very powerful card. Then we have a Dread Wanderer from Amonkhet, single black for a 2/1 that enters the battlefield tapped, so a nice aggressive 1-drop, and then for 2 and a black we can return it from the graveyard into play. Of course he'll still enter tapped, and then we can only do that when we have 1 or fewer cards in hand and only at sorcery speed, so just a nice aggressive 1-drop, fills out our curve nicely, and later in the game he can come back from the graveyard, so can't really ask much more for a 1-drop. Then we have Time to Reflect, which is an interesting new removal spell, single white, instant speed, exile target creature that blocked or was blocked by a zombie this turn. So it's a little bit conditional that you need the right circumstances, but in a deck full of zombies that shouldn't be a problem. So it looks to be a nice addition to our 1 mana removal suite in this deck. And of course the other 1 mana removal spell is Fatal Push, still very good, still deals with annoying vehicles like Smuggler's Copter, and we do have Evolving Wilds to enable Revolt as well, to maybe take out a larger creature as well. Another nice one is Dark Salvation, which is actually a pretty flexible card in this deck, since it's double X black. Target player puts X 2/2 zombie tokens into play, and then 1 target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each zombie that player controls. So typically you're gonna play this for X equals 1, so 3 mana total. You get 1 zombie, and then let's say you have 3 zombies in play, you give one of the opponent's creatures -3/-3. So it's a nice split card that makes a zombie and acts as removal, but it's a lot more flexible than that, since if you have 5 mana you can make 2 zombies, then the -1/-1 is going to be even better. But you can also play this for X equals 0, where you just pay the single black just to use this as a removal spell if you have enough zombies in play already to take out something. So very flexible, and of course goes very well into a zombie deck. Then another exciting new addition is Binding Mummy, which looks pretty unassuming, just 1 and a white for a 2/2. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under our control, we can tap target artifact or creature, so can also tap vehicles. So it turns out this effect is actually very good in this kind of deck, now that we have a more aggressive style of zombie deck with a lot of lords. You can just tap all of the opponent's blockers, keep attacking, and kill them pretty quickly. Also combines nicely with Menace, which we do have a number of zombies in the deck now that either have or grant Menace, and if you can tap down one of the 2 blockers and then all your zombies have Menace, then the opponent's not gonna be able to block. Then another filler 2-drop is Shambling Ghoul, all the way back from Magic Origins. Nothing special about it, enters battlefield tapped and is a 2/3, so relatively large for a 2-drop, but the fact that it enters tapped doesn't really synergize with our Cryptbreaker all that well, but still a decent filler 2-drop, and you need a critical mass of zombies for this deck to work. A more exciting 2-drop is Wayward Servant, a white and a black for a 2/2. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. So you usually want to lead with the Servant on turn 2 and then play out all your zombies and drain the opponent for a bunch. Of course, when you have effects that make multiple zombies, then you get to trigger the Servant multiple times. So effects that make zombie tokens are especially powerful with the Servant. Then we have a Diregraf Colossus, which is another kind of zombie lord, you could say. 2 and a black for a 2/2, enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in our graveyard. So late in the game when a lot of your zombies died, this is gonna be pretty big. And whenever we cast a zombie spell, we can put a 2/2 zombie token into play. And of course, zombie spell only includes creatures with the zombie type, so sorceries that make zombie tokens are not gonna trigger the Colossus, but still a very powerful card that will spawn a lot of zombies very quickly if it goes unanswered. Then we have another new addition from Amonkhet, Plague Belcher, 2 and a black for 5/4, which seems pretty excessive. Has menace, but of course there's a downside. When Plague Belcher enters the battlefield, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. So you're usually gonna put this on a Plague Belcher, but there are situations where you maybe want to put it on another zombie. And whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So another nice effect for an aggressive zombie deck. Then of course we get to our Lord of the Accursed, which is one of the more exciting new additions from Amonkhet. 2/3 gives all other zombies we control +1/+1, which is very, very powerful. And then for 1 and a black, tap the Lord, and then all zombies we control gain menace until end of turn. So this is a nice way to finish off opponents once you've got them pretty low and you just need to deal those last few points of damage. Then we have Gisa's Bidding, which for 2 and double black makes 2 2/2 zombie tokens. Also has Madness, so if we can discard this to our Cryptbreaker, then we can play this for 2 and a black instead, and of course then we're not down on card advantage, so that's nice, and we can even use this at instant speed. And of course making 2 zombies is very nice in a deck that benefits from having a lot of zombies, especially in combination with cards like Binding Mummy or Wayward Servant. They will all trigger multiple times, and of course more zombies means they get a lot better when you have a Lord in play. Then we have Liliana's Mastery, which is similar to the Bidding, but it costs 1 mana more, and it's an enchantment, so it will stay in play, and zombies we control get +1/+1, and that's of course permanently, so another nice Anthem effect. And if you just think about it, 5 mana making 2 2/2 zombies, they get +1/+1, so that's 5 mana for a total of 6 power and 6 toughness, is actually very nice. And then of course in a zombie deck where even more zombies get +1/+1, this card is very, very, very good. Then we have just the 1 copy of Cruel Revival from Magic Origins, destroying a non-zombie creature, and then we can return up to 1 zombie from our graveyard to our hand, so a nice 2 for 1. And then we have Liliana, Death's Majesty, 5 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker, +1 makes a 2/2 zombie and mills us for 2, -3 returns a card from the graveyard to the battlefield, and then -7 destroys all non-zombie creatures, so nice one-sided sweeper effect. So not much I can say about Liliana, just a very, very good card in this deck. And then finally, Never to return. This finally gives us a planeswalker removal spell in black, and the return part is also pretty nice, exiling a card from a graveyard and making a 2/2 zombie token, so it's even thematic in our zombie deck. And then our mana base, 5 plains, 10 swamps, 2 Shambling Vent, 2 Isolated Chapel, and the full 4 Evolving Wilds to fix our mana and to enable Revolt. So if that's the deck, now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which only has 1 land, so we can do better. And this is better. Alright, so we've got a nice set of 2-drops plus Dark Salvation as removal, and potentially a Curve Topper. Opponent leads with a Thornbow Archer, so they must be either an elf deck or an aggressive black deck. And Shambling Vent is a perfect turn 1 land. So next turn, probably gonna start with Binding Mummies to clear a path, although could potentially play the Ghoul if our opponent has removal. Alright, opponent is on an elf deck here. Scarred Vine Breeder, not the scariest elf. So elves versus zombies, pretty thematic. So I think we can start with a Binding Mummy here. which can block the Elves that are currently in play. And we picked up a nice removal spell, although I don't think we're gonna use this on any of these since they're not really that scary and there's other Elves that are more important to kill. Opponent is attacking, so they might have a trick here, but I think we're gonna make them use the trick if they have one. So yeah, show me what you got, I think is what we say here. And it's a Blossoming Defense, that's fine. So +2/+2 and hexproof. But of course our opponent didn't get to add anything to the board, and now we picked up a Colossus, which is a very nice draw, since now comes into play as a 3/3 because we have a zombie in the graveyard, and now next turn, if we get to untap with the Colossus, we get to go Ghoul plus Mummy and make 2 zombies thanks to the Colossus. And then we can start using our removal spells to get our creatures through. So if our opponent attacks now, I don't think I block. So might be a bluff, but I think it's too important for the Colossus to survive here. Could also be that our opponent has a fatal push and they want to enable revolt and are basically just suiciding the archer, but we can take one. This is fine. Alright, another Binding Mummy is not bad, so we can either go Ghoul plus Mummy or double Mummy if we want to, since we do have double white. I don't hate going double Mummy here, that way even if our opponent kills one of them, we'll still have the second one in play already when we play the Ghoul to maybe tap down some of the opponent's creatures. So yeah, let's go ahead and play a bunch of Mummies. Get our zombie tokens. And of course, since we now play a zombie, it will trigger the Binding Mummy, plus we get a token which triggers the Binding Mummy yet again, which means even if our opponent had another Blossoming Defense here, they couldn't ambush our Colossus. And I do think we are attacking here, since with this board presence we should be able to outrace the opponent. So now we basically start playing removal spells and zombies that triggered Binding Mummies to clear a path. And Dwynnen is certainly an elf I'm interested in killing. Opponent just attacks with the archer, doesn't want to trade with other elves there, and we could double block. Would be bad if our opponent still has that Blossoming Defense they could potentially have, or maybe it's still a fatal push they want to enable revolt for, in which case if we double block our opponent gets to kill both, or they get to trade for a Binding Mummy and kill the Colossus. But given that we want to use removal on Dwynnen, we might still want to make our opponent use the Blossoming Defense if they have one. On the other hand, we do have 2 removal spells, so we do have multiple ways to kill Dwynnen. So maybe this is still fine and we can take 2. So definitely an interesting spot there. Another Colossus, you say? So if we play the Colossus right now, we trigger the first one, make a zombie, and that's 2 triggers total, so 4 creatures that we can tap down, so we can tap down the opponent's entire board, and then attack for 4, 8, 11. Plus we can still Dark Salvation for x = 0, just to kill the Dwynnen. But then if our opponent has a way to protect Dwynnen, they get to attack back for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is potentially risky if they do have another Blossoming Defense. I think what I do here is I start by playing the Colossus, tap down the opponent's creatures, Then tap some more creatures. And then I think we Dark Salvation right now just to get the information. So we get zombies, this gets -7, -7. Does our opponent have another Blossoming Defense here? Doesn't look like it. Alright. So this did enable the Vine Breeder to get +3/+3, but we do have a few blockers back now, so I don't think we're gonna die next turn. So I think we can just attack with everyone. So 4, 8, 11 puts our opponent to 6, which means it's gonna be pretty trivial to kill them next turn. Alternatively, we could just leave back an extra token to play it extra safe, which I don't mind. This still hits for 9 damage, and then next turn we should still be able to deal enough since we have the Ghoul, which can tap 2, plus maybe a Never that can kill something. So yeah, let's do it like this. And let's see how our opponent attacks. 6 mana. And their last card is a Scarblade. So they can discard a card to give something -X/-X, but it of course has Summoning Sickness, so they can't use it this turn, and not sure why they played out the land, since they could have kept it in hand, but I guess they're just dead on board. Block like this. Opponents can use one of the Vine Breeders either to make this survive or to deal some extra damage, but then they're dead on the way back. And perfect. And Lord of the Accursed is gonna help us stab down the Scarblade. Pump our team, make some more zombies. Zombies beat elves. You've heard it here first. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is a little too land heavy here with 5 lands, so I think we can do better. Alright, this is better. We've got both our colors, a nice bunch of 2-drops and a Lord, plus some removal, so I think if we draw Swamp, this hand is very, very good. Let's lead with Swamp in case we need to Fatal Push. Opponent on a red so far. A red-white. Alright, there's a Smuggler's Copter. So we do have the Fatal Push for it, but I think I'll still be playing out a Binding Mummy here. Alright, Evolving Wilds is not bad. So let's go ahead and play the Mummy, since we need to start applying some pressure ourselves. So next turn, probably just gonna go another Mummy plus Evolving Wilds, or we could maybe enable Revolt plus kill a 3-drop with the Fatal Push. There's a Selfless Spirit, so that's gonna protect the Copter from the Fatal Push. So I think it's probably best for us to try and be as aggressive as possible, so we don't have to waste the Fatal Push on a Copter that's not gonna die anyways. So opponent gets to draw and discard, discards an Evolving Wilds. Alright, Wayward Servant is not bad, so we can start gaining some life back. I think we can attack, play the Servant, and then play Evolving Wilds, and then next turn we can, if we draw land, go Lord plus Fatal Push, otherwise we could go Mummy plus Fatal Push. And at some point we can maybe also think about using our other removal spell. But yeah, I like playing the Servant here, so let's attack for 2. And let's see if the opponent has an answer for one of these zombies. So no need to tap anything here. And say go. Land number 4, it's an Ether Hub, and their opponent has a Pia and Kirin. Alright, that's pretty good. Making 2 Thopter tokens here, and the opponent still gets to attack with the Smuggler's Copter. So, taking 5 here, but we will start getting some life back from our servants. Opponent discards another Copter, so their hand must be pretty good here. End of turn, let's remember to sacrifice Evolving Wilds to get a swamp. Alright, another 2-drop, so yeah, I think this is a turn where we need to Fatal Push something. So I think, let's see, it's probably better to play the Binding Mummy than the Shambling Ghoul, since at least this can potentially block Pia and Kirin. So let's play the Binding Mummy. And tap... I think we just tap Pia and Kirin, even though I wouldn't really mind trading, but it's probably best to tap them anyways. And then we want to attack first. And then we can think about using this Fatal Push in our second main phase. Since if we Fatal Push now, our opponent could have sacrificed the Spirit and then blocked with an indestructible creature, which would have been bad for us. But now we can think about just Fatal Pushing the Selfless Spirit, because if we use it on the Copter, we know our opponent's probably going to sacrifice a Spirit anyways. Plus, potentially we open up the opportunity for the opponent to sacrifice an artifact to deal 2 damage, which also wouldn't be good. Plus, if they sacrifice a Spirit to save the Copter, Pia and Kirin will be indestructible, so we can't trade with the Binding Mummy. So let's just Fatal Push right now. So this does mean that we won't have a good answer to the Copter anymore, since we could have perhaps used the Never on the Selfless Spirit and then Fatal Push on the Copter, but I don't think we have the time to, so would rather just try and race, play the Lord, gain some life from the Servant, and just tap down all the opponent's blockers. So 5 mana for the opponent now. They did discard a Copter earlier, so they must have something pretty good, and in fact they do. Declaration in Stone is pretty backbreaking here, exiling 2 of our zombies when we have a Zombie Lord in play, or in hand rather, and we don't really have the mana to sacrifice these clues. So would really like to start drawing more lands so we can both sack the clues and play out creatures. And their opponent discarded Valor and Accursed, so that means that they must have a pretty big token theme in their deck as well. And now they also add a Harvester in play, which is another flyer we have to deal with. And unfortunately, Binding Mummy is not gonna do it here. If we use Never on Pia and Kirin, opponent can still crew both vehicles and attack us for 6. And then we're dead a turn later. However, if we don't kill Pia and Kirin, our opponent still gets to hit us for 6 and then finishes off with the Pia and Kirin. So I don't really see how we get out of this. Could maybe gain a bunch of life by playing a bunch of zombies to drain the opponents, but that's also not gonna really work. So yeah, I think we're just dead here. Can maybe try and sack a clue to find an answer. Not sure what that would be. I guess we can just kill the Pia and Kirin and attack for 2. I guess we can still draw into a Fatal Push next turn, but then we're still dead to the second vehicle. So perhaps we should have sacked the clue to try and draw into Fatal Push there, to just Fatal Push the Pia and Kirin. But our opponent has a Gideon here, so we're dead. Since our opponent can make an Anthem, crew both vehicles, and that's lethal. So got a bit stuck on mana here, only 3 lands. We weren't really able to deploy our hands, and as you can see our opponent's almost empty-handed. So that's unfortunate. And of course the declaration was pretty good as well, otherwise we might have been able to race thanks to the Lord. But let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty good. Don't get to play Cryptbreaker turn 1, but do have a nice curve otherwise of 1-drops and 2-drops. As we see Ovia Pashri from the opponent. But we do have a Fatal Push to deal with that eventually. So tapped Shambling Vent, go. Next turn we have to decide what 2-drop we want to play. Probably the Servant. As we see Winding Constrictor from the opponent. That can definitely be a scary card. So we might have to Fatal Push that right now. Let's see here, we draw another Plains. If we play the Wayward Servant, it can block Ovia. And then next turn, when we play either the Colossus or perhaps another zombie, get to drain for 1. If we play the Shambling Ghoul, it doesn't block anything right now, but then next turn it can block the Winding Constrictor. Or we can just Fatal Push the Constrictor and then hope to get to 5 mana in time to deal with Ovia. I kind of like developing my board here, so I think I'll play the Servant. That way we maximize the number of times we drain the opponent for 1. And of course if they attack with the Constrictor, we attack back with the Servant. So they do attack. We'll take 2. And alright, still no second black source, so unfortunately we don't get to play 2 spells in the same turn here. But I think I'll be happy to just play a Colossus here, which might die to a removal spell, but it's just so much better if we get to untap with it and then start making 2/2 zombie tokens every turn. So I think the upside is high enough that we should just go for it, and I'll do it now just to drain for 1. I guess we could have technically attacked. If our opponent has removal, then this gets an additional +1/+1 counter instead of draining for 1, which the +1/+1 counter is probably more relevant. Opponent attacks with the Constrictor once again, no blocks. Now they do have 3 mana to start making tokens with Ovia. So ideally we can draw a Swamp here so we can Fatal Push and play a zombie. Alright, Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. So 2/2, that when it deals damage to a player, the opponent gets to put -1/-1 counter on target creature. But I don't think our opponents will have a lot of creatures themselves that put -1/-1 counters on their creatures, otherwise it's kind of a non-bow with the Winding Constrictor. I think we'll just play one of our zombies here. Question is which one? Probably Cryptbreaker to start drawing some extra cards. So let's start with that. Drain the opponent for 1. And I think we'll say go. We can tap the 3 zombies end of turn, but I want to make sure to have blockers left to block the Hapatra here, as our opponent does attack with both. So I think I'll just block the Hapatra with our Servant. Don't think I want to double block the Constrictor. And then we'll use the Cryptbreaker's ability. Alright, I guess we get to Time to Reflect instead. So we get to use our mana efficiently. And looks like the opponents might want to start making tokens with Ovia. Still no second swamp, even though of course we play a lot more swamps than plains. We can play the Shambling Ghoul, make a zombie, and that's basically it. And of course we can still draw some extra cards. Or we can draw some extra cards first, just to hopefully find a swamp so we can play Gisa's Bidding. I think I like that more. So let's tap 1, 2, 3. Alright, Binding Mummy also works. So we get to play Binding Mummy, make a zombie, and then we get to drain the opponent for 1, and then we get to play Shambling Ghoul and tap down Ovia, which our opponent now has to use if they want to make a token, and they do. And we still get to attack with our 2/2 zombie here. So lots of triggers. In the meantime, we're draining the opponent with every new zombie we make with the Wayward Servant. And if we draw any land, we get to play Crew Revival. And we still have the Fatal Push to answer one of these creatures. So the opponent needs something like a Sweeper effect here, perhaps, to get back into it. And they probably need to stay on defense now, otherwise they risk dying to the attack back. Alright, Never, which we also can't cast, unfortunately. Let's see, can we kill our opponent here? We can remove a blocker, our opponent can make a pretty big creature with Ovia as well, but that's still only 2 blockers total. And opponent's at 9, so yeah, they take more than enough. Unless their opponent has some other significant interaction, which they could certainly have. The other option is just to draw some more cards with Cryptbreaker, which is also reasonable. Could just make a zombie with Cryptbreaker to tap down, for example, the Winding Constrictor, but that does use our only black mana. I think we can play it slow here, so I think I'll start by tapping 3 zombies here. So let's tap our more valuable zombies. Alright, Binding Mummy's a good draw here, so we get to play the Binding Mummy. Opponent's gonna respond with Ovia, which is fine. So we get to tap the 3/3. I could have responded to the activation by fatal pushing one of the opponent's creatures. That way the construct is 1 smaller. But don't think it matters here because I wanted to leave up the Cryptbreaker activation as well. And with all these drains from the Wayward Servant, we are slowly killing our opponent. So if we make 1 more zombie here, discarding the bidding, which we could have madnessed if we had double black, but since we were stuck on single black, we couldn't activate Cryptbreaker and madness out the bidding. So let's just tap down the opponent's final blocker. Attack with everyone, and that should do it. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which only has the 1 plane, so I don't think we can keep. Alright, this hand's a bit slow, don't have a lot of early plays, but at least it's got some powerful cards in it. So I guess we'll keep. Don't really need to draw many more lands here. Opponent with a mountain. And a Cathartic Reunion. So let's see what the opponent is up to here. Discards. Alright, so this seems like a fair Cathartic Reunion, just discarding a sniper and a swamp. Nothing too scary. Let's play the Lord. Alright, opponent with a Minotaur here, Nahab the Worthy. So let's attack for 2. And then the question is if we want to use the Never or not. So we actually don't mind discarding a card since we have all these extra lands that we don't need. So I'm actually tempted to let our opponent just hit us with Nahab. Opponent could have Madness cards, I guess, which also explains the Cathartic Reunion. So it's probably better to use the Never here and hope our opponent doesn't follow up with the Planeswalker. So next turn we also have a play if we don't draw anything by flashing this back basically. Alright, Bloodhall Priest. So 4/4 and can potentially deal 2 damage if they're empty-handed. Dark Salvation's not bad, so we can make 2 zombies and give it -3/-3. But I actually think I like attacking, and if our opponent blocks we can Time to Reflect. And then we can also flash back the return. Opponent does block. So people might still be getting used to this card, or they were fine with that exchange. And we'll use the Aftermath, exiling probably just a creature here. Make a 3/3 zombie. And next turn we can make a much bigger Dark Salvation. A Ruthless Sniper. Into Cuts to kill our Lord. Alright, that's pretty good. And Cryptbreaker, so we can Cryptbreaker plus Dark Salvation for 2. And then we can still tap some zombies to draw a card. That's a pretty good turn. So let's attack for 2. No need to draw the card yet, since we already played our land and we're tapped out. Might as well play around some random discard spell. Incorrigible Youths. So our opponent clearly with a Madness discard theme. And they are attacking, pretty courageous. We'll take it. Could have double blocked, but I would like to keep our 3 zombies around. So let's draw a card. Binding Mummy, not bad. And the second Binding Mummy, even better. So I don't think we need to play around any sweepers from the aggressive red-black deck. So might as well play out Binding Mummies. And attack with our tokens. So here we have the option of also making a 2/2 by discarding Time to Reflect. And we could do that if our opponent goes to combat just to tap down the youths. Or we can just block and use Time to Reflect, we'll see. If our opponent tries to play defense, we can just end of turn make a zombie, tap all the blockers down and attack for the win. So I think we can let this attack happen. And we still have the option to use Time to Reflect. Opponent does attack. I actually think I take it. We only get punished if we take the damage if our opponent does have a sweeper, but this really doesn't strike me as a deck that would play any. So I think we just take the damage and then end of turn make a zombie and then tap down any potential blocker and then we should have a lethal. So let's take 4. Opponent flashes back the ribbon, which does 4 damage, but that's not nearly enough to kill us. So end of turn we can discard Time to Reflect, make a zombie, and don't need to tap anything down. And then we can still use the Cryptbreaker to draw a card. And there's a Wayward Servant, which can also drain the opponents by using the Cryptbreaker. And a bidding, so we can basically do it all here. I guess we could have also madnessed the Gisa's bidding here with the Cryptbreaker, which would have actually been pretty sweet. So I regret my decision of playing the Servant now. Play everything, don't need to tap anything down, drain the opponent with the Servant, and can potentially draw up to 3 cards here with the Cryptbreaker if we wanted to, but I guess we'll just attack for 4. I guess we can take a look at what's on top, right? Swamp and a Plague Belcher. Alright, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.